Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're really getting into the insights of King Abdullah II of Jordan. This is all drawn from his book, Our Last Best Chance, The Pursuit of Peace in a Time of Peril.
Mm-hmm.
And what makes this source material so interesting, I think, is you're getting ahead of state's own view, deeply personal and political reflections on a region where history is just, it's lived every single day, for better or worse.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is the author's own stated purpose, how it kind of shifted. He started writing hoping, to lay out how peace had been brokered. But by the time he finished, it really became clear that it was a story of how peace keeps slipping away, just eluding grasp. And he felt this profound sense of urgency. He really believed the window for a lasting solution was closing fast. And without seizing that moment, that near unanimous international consensus on what the solution looked like, well, another war, probably worse, seemed inevitable to him.
And you're getting such a specific viewpoint, aren't you? It's his personal lens. The king chose, very deliberately, to tell this story through the story of my own life. He says, by sharing what I have seen, what I have done, to show how the personal and the political are often intertwined. And he also directly states his aim is to challenge some of the false ideas about the region, to act as a kind of bridge between cultures.
Exactly. He points out something I think many find frustrating, this misconception. He says, when people in the West hear the words Arab, Muslim, or Middle East, they think of terrorism, suicide bombers, and wild-eyed fanatics hiding in caves. And he really wants people to think instead about, well, multi-million-dollar IT startups in Jordan, or Nobel Literature Prize winners in Egypt, the historic architecture of Damascus, which really brings up a crucial question, doesn't it? How do these perceptions, these kinds of ingrained ideas, actually shape policy and understanding? Or misunderstanding, maybe.
That context is so important, and it leads us right into our mission for this deep dive. We want to unpack his unique perspective, explore these pivotal moments he didn't just witness, but actually shaped, and ultimately try to understand what he means by the last best chance for peace. Okay, so let's get into it. It's pretty striking, isn't it, that he never actually set out to be king. He fully expected his life would be in the army. Can you tell us a bit more about that unexpected start?
Yeah, it's quite the story. He shares that, well, he was born crown prince, but then, at age 3, back in 1965, he was removed from the line of succession. And this was a direct result of his father, King Hussein, facing just a staggering number of assassination attempts, 18 documented ones, mostly during the 50s, with the rise of radical Arab nationalism, which wasn't exactly friendly to monarchies like Jordan. So his father, trying to create some stability, asked Parliament to amend the constitution. And he named his own brother, Prince Hassan, as the new heir. And this decision, Abdul was totally oblivious at the time, of course, but it ironically meant he got to have a, quote, relatively normal life.
18 attempts. That's just hard to fathom. Escaping that fate by, well, essentially an accident of birth order change. What were some of those early attempts, the really chilling ones that show just how dangerous things were for his father?
Well, he talks about two that are particularly grim. One involved hydrochloric acid being switched with his father's nose drops. Can you imagine? They only found out because a container fell and the enamel sink just started steaming and cracking, just terrifying.
Wow.
And the second was a poison plot. An assistant chef was apparently practicing on stray cats around the palace grounds, trying to figure out the right dosage before actually targeting the king. It just paints such a stark picture of the constant threat.
So you have this incredibly perilous backdrop, this constant danger. But then his childhood also had these moments of, well, surprising normalcy, even adventure.
It really did. He talks about these treasured memories, like his father racing around in a silver Mercedes-Benz 300 SL, the gull-wing model, or singing Popeye the Sailor Man sitting on his dad's lap while they were speeding down desert roads. They even had a shooting range at the bottom of the garden for family target practice.
A shooting range.
Yeah, so these moments, they seem ordinary in a way, but they probably gave him a kind of grounding, It made him maybe more approachable later on.
And he was still very young, only 5, when the 1967 Six-Day War happened. What was that like from his viewpoint? A child in the palace during a war.
He describes hearing these muffled bangs, seeing a big black column of smoke rising, and his father just impatiently tossed aside his toy telescope, rushed off to change into his military uniform. He remembers the family camping out in sleeping bags down in the basement, and his uncle, who was head of his father's security, slept outside Abdullah's bedroom door with a machine gun. But to him, as a 5-year-old, he says it all seemed like a great adventure, which is quite something. And interestingly, he points out that during that war, The Royal Jordanian Air Force actually shot down 8 Israeli planes. They were the only Arab air force to manage that. It kind of highlighted Jordan's surprising military effectiveness despite its size.
And then comes a really key part of his development, his
Yeah.
Western education. How did that come about? And what kind of impact did it have on him?
Well, his parents specifically sent him out of Jordan to escape the growing violence in the region. It was a conscious decision. He went to St. Edmunds in England first, struggled with English initially, he says, but picked it up fast, even got a British accent. Then later, at Deerfield Academy in the U.S., he really came to value what he called the egalitarian spirit. And there's this great anecdote he shares. Jim Smith, the dining hall manager, who was also the football coach, he apparently yelled at him good-naturedly, "Abdullah, I don't care if your father is the king of Jordan, I am the king in this dining hall."
Mm. That's brilliant.
Yeah. And Abdullah says it actually made him a better waiter. But that kind of experience, it really shaped his understanding of leadership based on merit, on doing the job, not just who your father is.
Really does show that practical side of him. Okay, so what about joining the military? Sandhurst specifically. Was that his choice?
Well, his father put it more like a command than a suggestion, as he puts it. He apparently visited the Citadel in South Carolina, but he found the strict Prussian-style curriculum a bit off-putting. So his father then suggested Sandhurst. Both his father and grandfather had gone there, so there was family history.
The family tradition.
Right. And there's a funny story from Sandhurst, too, about why he chose the cavalry over the infantry. He describes being absolutely miserable during an exercise, freezing fog, trench foot, the works. And then he sees a cavalry officer nice and warm inside a Scorpion light tank, enjoying a cup of tea and even a small glass of port.
Oh, you can see where this is going.
Totally. His immediate thought was, that's it. To hell with the infantry. I'm joining the cavalry. It shows that pragmatic streak again, doesn't it? Maybe even a bit opportunistic. It kind of foreshadows the political smarts he'd need later.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So his military career wasn't just about learning tactics. It threw him right into the middle of these regional tensions.
Yeah.
He mentions a specific incident at Fort Knox, I think, that really tested him personally, his leadership style.
Yes, absolutely. This was during a company commander course back in '85. First, there's this comment from an Israeli colonel in the same course. 40th Armored Brigade, you Jordanians are tough, referencing the '67 war, kind of setting a tone. But the real test, the crucible moment, came during a surprise inspection. A battalion commander deliberately ground his boot into a senior NCO's perfectly polished boot and then slapped another NCO.
What? Seriously?
Yeah, and Abdullah describes just snapping. He followed the commander back to his office and told him straight, "If you ever touch another one of my soldiers again, I swear to God I'll shoot you."
Wow.
Yeah.
It's intense.
Extremely. He says it was a low point. He even considered quitting the army then and there. But it really shows his fierce loyalty to his men, a principle that would become crucial later on.
That commitment really shines through there. And that kind of loyalty would be needed as the region headed towards the first Gulf War.
Yeah.
He actually had some direct and pretty disturbing encounters with Saddam Hussein's sons, didn't he? Uday and Qasem. What did he glean from those?
Yeah, unsettling is the word. He talks about being flown to Baghdad for what was called a fishing trip. It sounds quite surreal. He and his cousins were given these garish Hawaiian shirts to wear.
Hawaiian shirts.
Yeah.
And Baghdad.
Right. And later he recounts refusing a request from Saddam's sons for a gun with a silencer because he had heard these awful rumors that they would test their guns on unfortunate Iraqis in the basement of their palace.
Good grief.
And just before the war, he actually met with Qasem and Hussein Kamal. He tried to warn them. He'd just come from Staff College. He understood NATO air power. He warned them about it. But they were just in high spirits, completely underestimating the threat. It shows this dangerous sort of disconnect from reality in the Iraqi leadership.
And his father, King Hussein, he had this tremendous sense of foreboding about that war. He saw it as an unstoppable chain of events. What was behind that deep concern, and how did Jordan try to handle that incredibly tricky situation?
Well, his father was intensely worried about the human costs, the senseless loss of life and destruction, but also the long-term consequences, the destabilizing impact of an invasion of a major Arab country by America and her allies. He saw further down the road. He worked tirelessly trying to mediate. He even went with Yasser Arafat and Yemen's vice president to Baghdad, trying to negotiate the release of Western hostages held there.
And the king really emphasizes this point about his father. He was trusted, admired by pretty much everyone. Even leaders who might publicly criticize him would privately ask for his help, his intercession. That made him a really unique diplomatic figure in such a divided region.
That ability to bridge divides seems hereditary. Okay, let's shift to that huge personal turning point. His father's final illness. And that completely unexpected path to the throne. What was that period like? The atmosphere must have been incredibly tense. Oh, palpable tension, yes. This was Amman in 1998. His father's cancer had returned, and he describes this really shocking moment. Crown Prince Hassan, who was acting as regent at the time, Hassan informed some army officers that King Hussein was in dire straits, didn't have long. He said, "It is irreversible, just a matter of time."
Wow, that's incredibly blunt and potentially destabilizing.
Exactly. Abdullah was stunned. He actually had to go and verify the news directly with his father, and it was then that King Hussein made that momentous decision to change the line of succession again. He told Abdullah, "I want to make you crown prince. This is your right. You are the most capable. You are the one who can take the country forward."
What a burden to hear.
Immense. And his father also advised him, for your own safety, to make his own half-brother, Hamza, a crown prince once he took over, which just reveals the incredibly complex political maneuvering, the dangers, even in those final days.
Just layers upon layers of intrigue. So how did the actual transition happen? And what were those first challenges he faced as king? Especially with people doubting him.
Well, on January 25th, 1999, he was summoned to the palace. His father then issued this letter to Prince Hassan, which was made public. It stated, "I have intervened from my sickbed to prevent meddling in the affairs of the Arab army." And it specifically criticized the retiring of efficient officers. It was a clear signal, really, of a shift in power and direction.
So laying the groundwork.
Precisely. And importantly, Abdullah's own special operations commanders, men he trusted completely, had already put their units on alert days before. They were anticipating potential trouble, which gave him crucial backing and confidence during a very uncertain time. And one of his very first acts as king was, indeed, to issue that decree naming his brother Hamza as crown prince, a role, as you know, he relieved him of about 5 years later. But yes, he faced immediate skepticism. He quotes people saying, "He won't last more than 3 months." So he had to hit the ground running, focusing on tangible reforms, showing strong leadership right from the start to counter that narrative. And a huge priority right away was the economy. Jordan's economy had really taken a hit after the first Gulf War. You had aid cuts, expatriate workers returning home, straining resources. So rebuilding that was critical, and his approach was, well, quite innovative.
Right. And there's that great story about his first visit to President Clinton in '99. What exactly did he ask for? Because it wasn't what Clinton expected, was it?
Not at all. Clinton asked the standard question, right? What can I do to help Jordan? Probably expecting a request for direct financial aid. But Abdullah responded immediately, "Help us become a member of the World Trade Organization."
That's bold.
Very. He explicitly said, "I did not want handouts. I wanted us to have a chance to help ourselves." And incredibly, Jordan joined the WTO just 11 months later. That was a huge statement about self-reliance, about integrating globally, attracting investment, not just aid.
That's a real strategic move.
Definitely. And he also focused on public services. He tells this story about visiting al-Bashir Hospital. He found the conditions frustrating, had to go back 3 times before things actually started improving significantly. And he realized, he says, "I would need to see with my own eyes what was going on." It shows that very hands-on, almost impatient for results, leadership style.
In terms of change and perception, he credits his wife, Queen Rania, as a major force, particularly in challenging stereotypes about Arab women.
Yes, he highlights her work quite a bit. She's actively worked to tackle that frustrating misconception in the West that all Arab women are oppressed. He points out that women in Jordan, like Rania herself, go to university, have successful careers, often have more in common, he suggests, with professional women in London or New York than with this image of oppressed prisoners of Western imagination. And he quotes Rania saying, "We should judge women according to what's going on in their heads, rather than what's on top of their heads."
A powerful statement.
It is. And she uses modern tools. Social media launched the Madrasati initiative for schools. It's about action and visibility to counter those stereotypes.
Which brings us to another critical area, tackling extremism head-on. He describes a very firm, very proactive strategy.
Extremely proactive. He felt that extremists had essentially declared war on Jordan. So Jordan's policies shifted dramatically. It went from non-interference to actively hit them before they hit us, even if a terrorist group was planning attacks from another country. He brought together his intelligence chiefs, military leaders, political advisors, and basically told them, the gloves are off, I want you to get him, referring to Zarqawi at the time. And he even notes how Jordanian intelligence officers were crucial in helping U.S. Special Forces. They could identify Takfiri suspects, those extremists who declare other Muslims apostates, just by their mannerisms, their dress. That kind of deep cultural insight was key.
And he also takes issue with how the very concept of jihad has been twisted by these groups.
He really laments that, yes. He explains that jihad literally means struggle. And primarily, it refers to the internal struggle, for self-improvement, and then the wider struggle to improve the lives of others, the community. He's very clear that the Takfiris, who he just calls murderers and thugs, have embraced a deviant form of Islam. They've turned their backs, he says, on over 1,000 years of Islamic scholarship and tradition. It's an ideological perversion for him.
So given that ideological battleground, the Amman Message Initiative seems like a really significant strategic move.
Sure.
How did that work to counter the extremist narrative?
It was hugely significant. This was late 2004. He gathered leading Islamic scholars from across the spectrum. Their goal was to directly refute the Takfiri ideology from within Islam itself. They produced the Amman Message. And this document did several key things. It clearly defined what Islam is and what it is not. It recognized the validity of all 8 traditional schools of Islamic law, Sunni, Shia, Ibadi, and crucially, it forbade takfir, declaring other Muslims to be non-believers or apostates.
Which is exactly what the extremists do.
Precisely. And this message was ratified by over 500 prominent scholars worldwide. That created what he calls a consensus of Muslim scholars, which is legally binding according to Islamic law. It essentially declared the whole Takfiri movement unacceptable, illegal, and un-Islamic. A powerful counterstrike using theology and scholarship. As he says, ideas are the most potent weapons.
A battle of ideas. Now, shifting slightly, he also offers some pretty sharp reflections on the U.S. approach in Iraq after 2003, particularly democracy building.
He does. He was strongly against the war from the start, predicted it would be a bloodbath, unfortunately, correctly, and he recounts warning Paul Bremer, who was head of the Coalition Provisional Authority back then, warning him specifically against dissolving the Iraqi army. He argued it was like, quote, deciding to fire all the cops, firefighters, and ambulance drivers in New York City all at once, just dismantling the state apparatus.
Finding a vacuum.
Exactly. He believed that decision, combined with the sweeping de-Baathification policy, just unleashed anarchy and chaos. It removed institutions and alienated huge swaths of the population. And he's also critical of what he saw as the Bush administration's cookie-cutter approach to trying to export democracy, without really understanding the local ground realities. He points to the 2006 Palestinian elections as a prime example. Hamas won. But the result was the U.S. and EU cut off aid, Israel froze tax payments. So instead of fostering democracy, it ended up creating no viable partner for peace. His point is that without strong institutions, without a solid middle class, without a broad acceptance of democratic values first, just holding a vote can actually be disastrous.
That's a really sobering perspective on intervention. So bringing it all together, what does this mean for that central issue, the quest for peace, especially between Israelis and Palestinians?
Well, he makes a very clear point on this. He says the elements of a peace settlement are clear. Everyone knows what they are. A two-state solution. It's been endorsed by basically the entire international community. But, and it's a big but, he expresses deep, consistent frustration with Israeli leadership. He specifically mentions Netanyahu's, quote, blind and thoughtless choices, his refusal to commit to a complete freeze on settlements. He notes how the Israeli government ignored a ruling from the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, back in 2004. The ruling said the separation wall being built in the West Bank violated international law, but it was ignored.
Right.
And he also flatly rejects the so-called Jordan option, the idea that Jordan could somehow become the state for Palestinians. He's unequivocal. That simply will not happen. We will not allow it. The Palestinians do not want it, and Israel cannot force it. He says any attempt to force it will mean war and just expand the conflict.
So rejection of that option, frustration with the process.
Mm-hmm.
But he does hold out a positive vision, doesn't he? His dream for the region's economy.
He does. His ultimate vision is actually quite hopeful, economically at least. He talks about linking the economies of Israel, Palestine, and Jordan, creating a kind of common market, maybe like the Benelux countries in Europe. He sees massive potential there. Joint tourism, attracting foreign investment, collaborating on things like agriculture, making the desert bloom, as he puts it. But then he immediately brings it back to reality. He says these visions are just a mirage in the absence of political leaders with the courage to make peace. It comes back to leadership, or the lack thereof, preventing that potential from being realized.
So connecting that to the bigger picture, he seems to be presenting Israel with a very clear strategic choice.
Yes, very much so. He argues that accepting a two-state solution isn't just about two states. It essentially means a 57-state solution, that's his phrase, because it unlocks normal relations for Israel with the 57 Arab and Muslim states that back the Arab Peace Initiative.
An enormous diplomatic and security gain.
Huge. He puts it directly. If your leaders continue to choose conflict and war, each of you, meaning Israelis, can make a decision to choose peace. So for him, the two-state solution isn't just about Palestine. It's fundamentally about Israel's own long-term security and integration into the region. It's an offer of an unprecedented alliance.
What a remarkable journey we've taken through this book. A life really dedicated to leadership, service, and this relentless pursuit of peace in, well, one of the most complex places on earth. The King's message feels like one of, yes, urgent hope, but also a really stark warning about what happens if that hope isn't acted upon.
Absolutely. He concludes with this really powerful statement. He fears that unless there's some kind of positive breakthrough, and soon, then, quote, we will miss our last chance for peace in a generation and condemn our region to suffer another cycle of violence, war, and death. It's a very heavy conclusion.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty provocative thought to consider. If, as King Abdullah suggests, genuine lasting peace for Israel really only comes through that 57-state solution, which hinges on a two-state deal with the Palestinians, what could possibly be the next last best chance if this current window really does slam shut?
And perhaps just as importantly, what are the hidden costs, the accumulating damage of not seizing this chance? What does that ongoing failure cost everyone involved?
Exactly. Plenty to think about, plenty to question. This has been The Deep Dive.